What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to either listen or watch this little podcast that I have going on here. As always, before I get into today's episode, I would like to ask you a huge favor. Please make sure you have subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. So, Apple, Spotify, Google, and all those other great podcast platforms. Subscribe. Share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what we are doing here. We also have video versions of the podcast that generally go up a little bit later in the week on YouTube and on Facebook as well. So please make sure that you share that around with your friends if you think that they're going to get some value out of what we're doing here. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. When I say we, it's me. I'm the one that's been doing this for the last 18 months. I don't edit this podcast. It is just kind of raw. It's uncut, and that's the way that I wanted to try and keep it all the way through. So a lot of podcasts out there are kind of heavily edited. The idea is for this podcast to be a little bit raw and unedited, and just me riffing a little bit on some thoughts, on some topics that maybe I've got some questions about from you. The messages of support and the content suggestions and anything like that, please send them through. It means the world to me that we've actually got a whole bunch of people listening to this on. As I said, we just ticked over on 20,000 downloads, which for me is a really massive achievement. I never thought when I started this podcast 18 months ago that we'd get to where we are so quickly. For some podcasts, that might be a milestone that they hit quicker, but for me, it was just something that I started off in the little office in the gym. And we've been doing it now for 18 months, and I would like to think that I'm going to continue to do it. The one thing that now I've gone on for 2 minutes about probably nothing much, but that's okay. The one thing that I am going to try and do over the next 12 months is try and get some more people on the podcast. So if you've got some suggestions around who you would like me to have a conversation with, just in regards to their experience as a dad, send it through so I can get in contact with them and we can get them on the podcast and we can have a little bit of a conversation. One thing that I'd like to do over the next 12 months is get some more guests on there, so it's not just me talking all the time, because it is easy to run out of topics. It is easy to run out of content, and it's something that I want to continue to do every week, despite there might be a week here and there where I need to just take a week off to mentally decompress and just deal with whatever I've got going on in my life. And today, rather than it being the last couple of weeks, what I've done is I've done topics around training, and within the topics within training, I've tried to give out some actionable steps, some things that you can focus on to hopefully, if it's a situation that you want to improve, to continue to improve. And that's one of the things with the podcast that I always endeavor to do, is to try and hopefully give you out some actionable steps and some actionable bits of information. This week, I'm just going to talk about something that I've been focusing on for the last, it's always something that I've tried to focus on, but it's really probably come to light over the last 6 months, something that I've been trying to focus on more and more and more. And it's just taking some joy in the small interactions and the little things that happen daily, and being more grateful for those small things. Because if you've listened to the podcast, especially over the last 6 months, you will have known that I've gone through a pretty major transition in my life. Our family's gone through a pretty major transition in their life. We've gone from, owning an in-person business to transitioning to an online business. And for the most part, it does feel like from an overall perspective, our life's kind of been tipped upside down a little bit. Now, there are a lot worse things that can happen in life compared to what we've been through. I 100% acknowledge that. But sometimes when you have these major upheavals and these major changes happening, it can feel like nothing's ever going right, like nothing's ever moving in the right direction. And it felt like that quite a bit. And there's still times where it does feel like that, like I'm questioning. I always question, have I made the right decision? And I think it's kind of human nature to revert back to our past decisions if we feel like things aren't going right. So from the point of view of, I guess, big positive milestones, they've been scarce. They've been few and far between. And the thing that I've really tried to focus on is taking joy in the small interactions I've had, the little things that are happening with our kids, the little interactions that I have with different people on a daily basis, and really being grateful for those, really trying to be in the moment. So I'll give you an example. Just literally sitting in the lounge room and the kids will be playing, they'll be doing something, and just sitting there without a phone, without anything else around, and just watching them play and watching how their little minds tick over when they're doing something, and watching how they learn, watching how they take in information, and just being grateful for that thing, because there is so much within that little moment and especially as they get older, because I do know that these moments are going to become few and far, few and far between. Is they're going to, as they get older, they're going to have their friends from school. They're going to be able to go and do other things which don't involve us. But being in that moment and watching those things and really being grateful for the fact that I'm here and I'm able to experience that with them has been a really good thing for me over the last 6 months. It can be something of me just having a conversation with a friend, being able to sit down, and whether it's having a beer or grabbing a coffee with a friend, and just being grateful for the fact that I'm in that moment and really being present in that moment. And while I'm in that moment, really trying to not take on board the other bigger things that are happening, understanding that if I just take this 20 to 30 minutes or even an hour, appreciating the moment that I'm in, whether it's with the kids, with a friend, with my wife, whatever the case might be, and really being in that moment and being happy to be there, being grateful to be there, that it's not going to detract from the bigger work that I'm doing. It's not going to make the situation worse that what I'm doing. In fact, I've actually found by doing that, it's actually, even though it may not have moved the needle on certain things that I need to do, it's reinvigorated me to be able to take actions on some of the hard stuff, some of the hard work that I've needed to do to kind of start to move everything in the right direction. But, the big message for today, and I'm going to probably make this a shorter episode just because there's not really a lot that needs to be said, but I just wanted to emphasize that one thing that has really helped me is just appreciating the small things, the small interactions, to a point where, I'm even and being so in the moment and so into that individual interaction that you notice other things and you can be grateful for more things in your life, because it's very, very hard to get caught up in the big overarching things that are happening. Um, the fact that, maybe you need more money, maybe, you know, you're not feeling happy with yourself and all of that, but there are so many good things that are happening in life. And there are so many good things that are happening in my life, even though it may seem at times like the world is crumbling down. By really trying to make an effort to be present in that situation, it's really helped me. And it's really then helped me go and attack some of the more difficult things that I've had to do in order to get myself moving forward and potentially get myself out of a bad situation. So I know there's a saying around of don't sweat the small stuff. And yes, it depends on the situation. I kind of subscribe to that a little bit, but I also think that part of that saying should be like appreciate the small stuff, be grateful for the small stuff, because there's going to be small interactions that you're going to have, especially with your kids, that will never happen for a second time. And I've been guilty of it in the past where I've been so focused on the bigger things that are happening in my life that I've potentially missed some of those smaller instances that are happening with my kids in the moment. And it's something that I'm trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be work to do. That doesn't mean it's going to take away the stress and the strain and the feeling that you have about potentially this bigger situation that happens. It just means that you can enjoy that moment. You can be grateful for that moment. And then when you've got to knuckle up and you've got to deal with something, you've got to have a difficult conversation with somebody, because I've been able to take some joy in those small interactions and those small moments, it has actually made it easier to do those things. It hasn't necessarily made it more comfortable, and it hasn't necessarily diminished my feelings around those little things. But I guess it's made me understand that there are more important things in life than some of those big things that are constantly playing on my mind. And don't get me wrong, we need money to survive. We need to make sure we've got a roof over our heads. We need to make sure that, you know, necessities are taken care of. Like, that's always going to be a stress. And that's something that, as a business owner, like, I've struggled with over the last 10 years. There's been times, especially through this whole COVID period, where I don't know how we're going to pay for groceries one week, or I don't know whether we're going to be able to, pay for where we're living, like things like that. And that's like, that stress can be debilitating, like completely debilitating. And no amount of positive thinking can make that go away. There is actions where you can try and move, and, but that's another topic where I think that if you start to take action towards moving and getting rid of those things, or how can I fix these things, it can help. But anyway, I digress for a little bit. But for me, over the last 6 months, while we've been going through these changes, really trying to be present in the moment and appreciate the moments that I'm going through, like to almost a microscopic level. Like, you know, if the kids are playing with something, like, how are they playing with it? How are they taking in that information? And how are they adjusting to challenges in their own way? Like my son right now, we've got all these wooden train tracks for him, and he loves building wooden train tracks. Watching him put the train tracks together, how his little mind processes, oh, this doesn't fit with that, and and then move things around, go and grab a different size piece because he wants it to do this, he wants a particular circle, and watching those things and being present in that moment, literally just sitting there and watching him doing it and being grateful for that. The fact that I'm in a position to be able to watch him do that, and the fact that I've got these people in my life where I'm so privileged and grateful to be a part of that, has really been a help for me over the last 6 months, when there's been other things that have just felt like the walls are closing in, have felt almost crushing. So I guess the message for today is that, while some people will tell you not to sweat the small stuff, sometimes you just need to appreciate the small stuff. You need to take some time to sit there and smell the roses. And while no one's ever going to understand your position, no one's going to ever understand how you process information. And while it might not make those things go away, or those other feelings go away, it can sometimes give you a moment to breathe and give you a moment to go, you know what, this right here, this is why I do it. And this is what I work for. I work for these small moments, and I work to try and help my kids and my family and my wife, but most importantly for myself, to be able to have these small moments with them and appreciate them. So, hey, let me know if you've ever felt like that, and let me know if you use that as, I'm not even going to call it a technique, but just if you spend some time every day just appreciating the small stuff, just sitting there watching an interaction and understanding that, exactly what you're going through right now may never happen again. And appreciate the time you have with your kids, your wife, your significant other, your friends. Take care. Like, it's such a cool thing to be able to watch that and be able to understand those moments and see it happen from a bird's eye view. So take some time to appreciate, be grateful for those moments. It's not going to make everything better, but it can sometimes make you understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. And yes, sometimes it can make those bigger things, those overarching things that we have to deal with on a longer scale or a bigger level, easier to deal with. So take care. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.